of God in Luke 15, 1 through 10, common English Bible, occasions of celebration. All the tax collectors and sinners were gathering around Jesus to listen to him. The Pharisees and legal experts were grumbling, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Jesus told them this parable. Suppose someone among you had 100 sheep and lost one of them. Wouldn't he leave the other 99 in the pasture and search for the lost one until he finds it? And when he finds it, he is thrilled and places it on his shoulders. When he arrives home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, "Celebrate with me, because I found my lost sheep." In the same way, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who changes both heart and life than over 99 righteous people who have no need to change their hearts and lives. Or what woman, if she owns 10 silver coins and loses one of them, won't light a lamp and sweep the house, searching her home carefully until she finds it? When she finds it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, "Celebrate with me, because I found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, joy breaks out in the presence of God's angels over one sinner who changes both heart and life. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Those are probably pretty familiar stories, so I have a couple more to add. Nasruddin rode the train to work every day, and one day, as usual, the train conductor came around and asked for his ticket. And he began fumbling around in his coat pockets and his pants pockets, and then in other people's pockets. And he looked in his briefcase and his bag and in other people's bag. And finally, the train conductor said, "Nasruddin, I'm sure you have a ticket. Why don't you just look in your breast pocket? That's where most men keep their tickets." "Oh no," said Nasruddin, "I can't look there. Why, if it was there, I would have no hope." Another story about Nasruddin. One day he was out in the street frantically searching for something, and people asked him, "What are you searching for?" "I've lost my key." So a bunch of helpful people joined in the search to look for the lost key, and someone finally asked, "Well, where did you lose it?" And he said, "In the house." And people looked at each other. "Then why are you searching for it in the street?" "Because there's more light out here." Surely we all have stories about losing something important. One of those frightful occasions for me was a cold winter night when I had to be at an event at Montview Presbyterian. And I was in my office running late and in a rush to get there. I had my keys in my hands, and then I didn't. I retraced my steps to the areas where I had been, lifting papers, opening the drawers, you know the drill. Then I searched in areas where I hadn't been because, they might have walked off on their own. And I searched, and finally I had to leave because I was part of the program. And Joan Root gave me a ride. Afterwards, I sheepishly called Art to come and pick me up. It was cold outside. It was the kind of night when you see your breath. So while I was standing on the corner, I put my hands in my coat pocket. I had never put my keys in my coat pocket before. They'd always go right here in my right front pocket, always, but there they were. And I was probably more embarrassed and relieved, and probably felt sillier than joyful at finding them. But, of course, losing your house or office or car keys is obviously just an inconvenience compared to the economic loss for the woman and the shepherd. In addition, I've never had to frantically search until I found a pet, my lost pet. And I've never lost a child and had to desperately search until they were found. I've been a lost child, and I felt such panic that I couldn't breathe. And I'm not sure which one of us was happier to be reunited. Who was more relieved, my mom or me? And that's actually one of the fundamental questions in the effort to understand this parable by Jesus. For is this a parable about being lost or being found? Is this a story about the woman who lost a coin, or is this about a coin that is found? Who do we identify in the story? Are we the sheep or the shepherd? Are we the searcher or the object of the search? The rescued or the rescuer? And most of us live pretty comfortable, privileged lives, so I think we're probably more likely to see ourselves in the role of a searcher than the searched. The doer of good deeds, not the recipient. And therefore we may see this as a Dale Carnegie type lesson to be persistent. The motivational guru said, most of the important things in the world have been accomplished by people who have kept on trying when there seemed to be no hope at all. And the sermon about the woman and the coin could be called, Nevertheless, She Persisted. But why did Jesus tell this parable? I mean, who was the audience for whom Jesus told this parable? So you will read, all the tax collectors and sinners were gathering around Jesus to listen to him. The Pharisees and the legal experts were grumbling, saying, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. And so Jesus told them this parable. Now, who the them is in this isn't quite as clear as it could be. So I think the translation by Eugene Peterson in the Message draws a better picture. So a lot of men of doubtful reputation had started hanging around Jesus, listening intently. The Pharisees and religion scholars were not pleased, not pleased at all. They growled, he takes in sinners and eats meals with them, treating them like old friends. And their grumbling triggered this story. Their grumbling triggered this story. And I thought, who might today's grumblers be? Like, have you ever noticed how people who insist all lives matter never said anything about that until the first time someone said Black Lives Matter? You ever notice how people who don't support equal rights for LGBTQ people call those special rights? You ever notice how a deficit isn't the problem when super rich people want more money, but complain vociferously when hungry people want to avoid malnutrition, or complain about the cost of toothpaste and soap for children held in cages? You ever notice how people who glorify the sacrifices of their ancestors to make a better life for their family than they had in Germany or Norway are the ones who demand a wall with extra sharp points and super tall to maximize an injury from a fall, with black paint to make it hotter to touch? Grumblers, not pleased that Jesus would associate with those kind of people, not pleased at all. And so in our passage today, the people of doubtful reputation watched as Jesus told parables to the grumblers about searching for one more lost sheep and one missing coin, and then rejoicing when they are found. And we may think that Jesus is encouraging the grumblers to be less grumbly about including people of doubtful reputation. It's one way we could look at it, read the text, and then sing the song, Draw the Circle Wide. And the story is an excellent counterpoint to the pastor who refused to serve communion to LGBTQ activists wearing a rainbow sash. To expose the hypocrisy, some of them went forward anyway. But instead of rejection, they experienced grace when an elderly man in front of them took the wafer he had been served and crumpled it up into little pieces and handed it out so everyone could receive communion. Like a tearjerker moment. So Jesus told a lovely parable, but it has a weird ending. And it doesn't exactly seem to fit as a conclusion to joy over finding what was missing. What are we to make of this last verse about the joy of one sinner who changes both heart and life? Or as the New Revised Standard Version puts it, joy in the presence of the angels over one sinner who repents. So who's he talking about? Is he talking about the doubtful reputation folks? The ones labeled sinners by the grumblers? But if you follow the text carefully, Jesus is still talking to the grumblers when he talks about the joy of sinners repenting. And he's not pointing over at those other folks. Jesus reverses our expectations and seems to be saying that the joy will come to heaven when the Pharisees and religion scholars repent. Which also would mean that the Pharisees and the religion scholars are the lost sheep and the missing coin. And following the same logic, God is the shepherd who goes after the one lost sheep, and God is the woman who will not stop searching until she has found the one that is missing. And it is about God that we can say, nevertheless, she persisted. And somehow over all these years, I've missed that. Or maybe just skipped over it, because it's either a confusing line or I just don't like it. But this parable is just as confusing as those simple Nazarene stories, after which, hearing those two stories, you go, what? All of these stories have depths of meaning that can be explored for years. So on Thursday, 6 of us ate noodles and discussed today's text from the Gospel of Luke. And after making this very point that it would seem that the Pharisees are the sinners in need of repentance, Larry Ricketts said, well then, by us identifying today's grumblers, we've just put ourselves in the position of the Pharisees. And oh dear, yes, he's right. And now I'm the one in need of repentance. So sure, this story is still a celebration of Jesus' love for people of doubtful reputation. But they're not the ones being saved here. They're not the ones in need of salvation. The story is about the joy in heaven when a grumbler repents, when a grumbler changes both heart and life. And long after we may have given up on people we label the grumblers, this is a story about how God will never stop searching for whatever or whoever is missing until we are all reunited. Every day when I want to give up on the other side, this story speaks of the joy of our reunification, our reconciliation. When we may be too quick to give up on the grumblers, God does not similarly lack patience, because we're all too valuable. And the all lives matter and special rights and tax cuts for the wealthy and the punish the asylum seeker grumbler is never too lost for God to keep searching to. But I did it again, didn't I? I just noticed all of a sudden I turned into the grumbler about those people of my definition of doubtful reputation. And truthfully, I might be very unhappy seeing them hanging around Jesus too. But fortunately, this story also means that when we have become the grumblers, God, the searcher, won't give up on us either. And that means we can't give up on each other. Nazarene was right to keep that ticket in his pocket, because it's too early to give up hope in each other. In the story, we are not the shepherd in need of a lesson in persistence. We are the object of the rescue. We are not the woman searching for what is missing, but the one for whom she will never stop searching. Sometimes we're the grumblers, and sometimes we're the people of doubtful reputation, but all of us always in need of grace and never too lost to be found. As Brian Stevenson said of the men he represents on death row, we are all more than the worst thing we've ever done.